Mark Carney and his wife step off the plane in Mumbai. Warm smiles, handshakes, ceremony, respect. And here's what makes that moment historic. Just a year ago, this visit would have been unthinkable. Relations between Canada and India were fractured, diplomatic tensions, accusations, frozen ties. And yet, here we are. Not just a visit, but a reset. And not just a reset, but a strategic pivot. Because make no mistake, this trip is not about optics. It's about leverage. Carney's trip marks the first visit of a Canadian Prime Minister since relations have thawed, a significant step for bilateral relations. This follows Canada publicly accusing India of playing a role in a murder on Canadian soil. A big reason behind the trip, U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war, as Canada looks to diversify its trading partners. Let's pause for a second, because the warm welcome in Mumbai is not routine diplomacy. It is symbolic. Remember, relations between Canada and India were deeply strained. Diplomatic rupture, public accusations, security tensions. A year ago, this visit would have been politically radioactive. And yet, Mark Carney and his wife land in India to a visibly warmer tone. Why? Because India is not just welcoming Canada. It is welcoming leadership. India sees something shifting. It sees that Canada under Mark Carney is not drifting. It is emerging. Emerging as a serious global economic player. Emerging as a country willing to withstand pressure. Emerging as a country that didn't collapse under Donald Trump's tariff threats. Think about the optics globally. When Trump escalated pressure, many governments recalibrated around Washington. Some softened. Some rushed to negotiate. But Carney didn't. He responded with diversification. He responded with discipline. And that kind of calm resilience earns something far more powerful than applause. It earns respect. India understands this. India understands when a leader refuses to negotiate from fear. That is why this welcome matters. This is not India overlooking past tensions. This is India recognizing a strategic opportunity. A country that is expanding energy infrastructure. A country that is repositioning itself globally, and a prime minister who has shown that even under heavy U.S. trade threats, Canada stays steady. That steadiness signals reliability. Reliability attracts partners, and partners want to align with stability. That is why countries are lining up, because they see that Canada under Carney is not reactive. It is strategic, and that reputation, forged under pressure from Donald Trump, is now shaping global perception. India's welcome is not just diplomatic courtesy. It is geopolitical acknowledgement. When it comes to India, for this particular moment, we have a strategic window of opportunity. This is a really important moment for the Prime Minister to seize, coming out of his Davos speech, which received a lot of positive attention in India as well as in Australia, Japan, and the entire world. Basically, the world is paying attention to Canada. We want to diversify our partners. India wants to diversify its partnerships. Yes, we have issues in the relationship. We're making progress on those issues, and we now have to seize the opportunities that are before us. Let's be blunt. The United States under Donald Trump has weaponized trade, volatility, tariffs, pressure, ultimatums. So what did Carney do? He didn't shout. He diversified. And this India trip is part of a broader strategy. Reduce dependency, expand markets, build resilience. A big reason behind the trip, Donald Trump's trade war. That's not speculation. That's stated analysis. This is strategic insulation. If Canada expands into India, Japan, Australia, the Gulf, the EU, then Washington's leverage shrinks. And that changes everything. Now, here's where this gets explosive. India is one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. It needs oil, natural gas, LNG, uranium, critical minerals. And Canada produces all of it, in spades. There are even discussions of multi-year uranium export deals. Think about what that means. India could become one of the largest long-term buyers of Canadian energy. And energy isn't just commerce, it's geopolitical influence. If India becomes a major customer of Canadian oil, LNG, and uranium, that is a structural shift. That is Canada embedding itself into the Indo-Pacific growth engine. And that is a direct reduction of reliance on Trump's America. This is not a symbolic handshake trip. There is groundwork behind it, ministerial meetings, energy discussions, security dialogues, education partnerships, technology cooperation. There are active discussions toward a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. And here's the part most people miss. Canada is currently the only G7 country without a preferential trade deal with India. The UK signed one. The EU signed one. Canada is moving. That's not desperation. That's catching up fast. Experts are stating a line that should not be underestimated. Canada is having a moment on the global stage. That's not flattery. That's observation. Because look at the sequence. Trade threats from Washington, escalating tariff rhetoric, pressure to concede, and instead of shrinking, Canada expanded. It strengthened China access. It deepened EU cooperation. It built Indo-Pacific bridges. It expanded energy export infrastructure like TMX and LNG Canada. It accelerated nuclear and uranium discussions. It pursued a comprehensive economic partnership with India. This is not coincidence. This is momentum. And momentum attracts momentum. When one country shows it can withstand pressure and still grow, others notice. Global leaders are watching how Carney handled Trump's volatility. They are watching how he countered tariff pressure without theatrics. They are watching how he avoided escalation but refused capitulation. And they are drawing conclusions. The conclusion: Canada is stable. Canada is predictable. Canada is strategic. And that is exactly the type of partner rising economies like India want. Because India itself is navigating U.S. trade volatility. India itself understands the risks of overdependence. India sees in Canada a partner walking the same path: diversification, energy security, strategic autonomy. So when Carney lands in Mumbai, the welcome is not just warm because relations thawed. It's warm because Canada's trajectory is upward. Because global respect follows resilience. Because leadership under pressure reveals character. And because Mark Carney has shown that Canada will not bend simply because the United States demands it. This is why this visit matters beyond bilateral relations. It signals that Canada is no longer operating inside Washington's shadow. It is building its own gravitational pull. And countries like India are responding to that shift. Relations between Canada and India fractured after Ottawa made allegations linking the Indian government to violent crime on Canadian soil. But Donald Trump's tariffs are forcing Canada to seek out new trade partners. Canada produces oil, natural gas, and uranium in spades. And Indian officials say they are eager customers. You're an energy superpower, but you're only supplying one country. And so for you to be able to supply all of us, and we would be your biggest client, I think that is possible in the near future. Donald Trump's leverage model depends on dependence. If Canada depends heavily on U.S. markets, tariffs hurt. If Canada depends less, tariffs lose impact. This India visit signals Canada is building optionality. Optionality reduces vulnerability. And vulnerability is what pressure exploits. That's why this trip matters far beyond Mumbai. This is Canada signaling it will not negotiate from fear. There were experts saying something that matters deeply. It's good to be an energy superpower, but you're only supplying one country. That's the core. Energy diversification is economic independence. And if India becomes a multi-decade buyer of Canadian uranium and LNG, Canada becomes embedded in one of the fastest-growing energy markets in the world. That's generational strategy, not reactive politics. This trip is not about repairing a relationship. It's about reshaping Canada's global positioning. From frosty relations to strategic partnership. From diplomatic tension to energy cooperation. From reliance on a volatile neighbor to diversified global alignment. Mark Carney is not slowing down. He is not retreating. He is not negotiating from weakness. He is expanding Canada's economic map. And if India becomes one of Canada's largest energy customers, that changes the leverage equation permanently. This isn't just a state visit. It's a message. Canada will not be cornered. Now, let me expand on what this really means for the architecture of global trade relationships and why Canada's approach to India represents a fundamental shift in how middle powers navigate great power competition in the 21st century. Because what we're witnessing is not just bilateral diplomacy. It's the emergence of a new model for how countries can maintain strategic autonomy in an era of multipolar competition. The traditional framework for understanding Canada-India relations has been through the lens of the Quad, United States, Japan, India, and Australia, and broader Indo-Pacific strategy. In that framework, Canada has been a peripheral player, geographically distant from the region, economically focused on North America, and diplomatically cautious about upsetting the U.S.-Canada relationship by pursuing independent regional partnerships. But that framework assumed a stable, predictable U.S.-Canada relationship where Canadian interests were generally aligned with American preferences. and where deviating from American priorities carried costs that outweighed the benefits. Trump's trade volatility shattered that assumption. When the United States becomes an unreliable economic partner, when it weaponizes trade relationships for domestic political purposes, when it treats allies as adversaries to be coerced rather than partners to be engaged, the entire calculus changes. Canada's pivot to India is significant precisely because it represents Canada stepping out of the American shadow in the Indo-Pacific. The United States has been trying to build a coalition to counterbalance Chinese influence in the region, with India as a crucial partner. Canada's previous reluctance to deeply engage with India was partly driven by the desire not to complicate the bilateral relationship with the United States by appearing too independent in foreign policy. But when the bilateral relationship with the United States is already strained, when Trump has already demonstrated that he views Canada as a problem to be managed rather than a partner to be respected, then the cost of pursuing an independent India strategy drops dramatically. Why defer to American preferences about the Indo-Pacific when America isn't deferring to Canadian concerns about trade stability? This is the unintended consequence of Trump's coercive approach to allies. By treating Canada as dispensable, he freed Canada to pursue relationships that it had previously approached cautiously. The diplomatic rupture with India over the assassination allegations would normally have taken years to repair through careful, quiet diplomacy. But the urgency created by Trump's trade war accelerated that timeline dramatically. Both Canada and India had strong incentives to move past their tensions quickly. For Canada, India represents a massive, growing market for exactly the resources Canada produces: energy, minerals, agricultural products. For India, Canada represents a stable, democratic supplier of critical resources that doesn't come with the geopolitical complications of Middle Eastern energy or the political sensitivities of Russian minerals. The speed of the rapprochement tells you something important. Both countries decided that the strategic benefits of partnership outweighed the political costs of moving past recent tensions. That's a calculation that only makes sense in the context of broader geopolitical shifts, particularly the need both countries feel to diversify away from over-reliance on volatile great powers. India has been navigating its own complicated relationship with the United States. While India is a key partner in American Indo-Pacific strategy, New Delhi has maintained its strategic autonomy, refusing to pick sides comprehensively between the United States and China, maintaining ties with Russia despite American pressure, and generally pursuing an independent foreign policy that prioritizes Indian interests over great power preferences. When India looks at how Canada is handling American trade coercion, they see a kindred spirit. Both countries want good relationships with the United States. Both benefit from American security commitments and economic integration. But both are also determined to maintain the ability to make independent choices. That shared commitment to strategic autonomy creates the basis for a partnership that goes beyond just trade deals. The energy dimension is particularly significant because energy security is one of India's most pressing strategic challenges. India imports the vast majority of its oil and natural gas, making it vulnerable to supply disruptions and price volatility. Diversifying energy suppliers is a core strategic priority for New Delhi. Canada offers exactly what India needs: massive energy resources, political stability, democratic governance, and a willingness to build long-term commercial relationships without the political strings that come with other suppliers. Canadian uranium is especially important. India has ambitious plans for nuclear power expansion as part of its energy mix. Reliable uranium supply is essential for those plans. Canada has some of the world's highest-grade uranium deposits and a sophisticated nuclear supply chain. A long-term Canadian-Indian uranium partnership would be transformative for both countries, providing India with secure supply and providing Canada with a major, stable customer outside North America. The LNG dimension is equally significant. India's energy demand is projected to grow dramatically over the next 2 decades. LNG will be a crucial part of meeting that demand, especially as India transitions away from coal. Canada's West Coast LNG export capacity, which has been developed primarily with Asian markets in mind, positions Canada perfectly to become a major supplier to Indian utilities. If these energy partnerships mature as both sides hope, Canada will have successfully embedded itself into India's long-term energy security planning. That's not a transactional relationship that can be easily disrupted by short-term political tensions. That's structural integration that creates lasting interdependence and alignment of interests. The broader lesson here is about how middle powers can successfully navigate a multipolar world. The old model, align with a great power, accept subordination in exchange for security and market access, is breaking down. Great powers are less reliable, more willing to weaponize economic relationships, and more focused on their own narrow interests rather than broader alliance management. In that environment, middle powers need options. They need diversified relationships. They need the ability to withstand pressure from any single partner without catastrophic consequences. Canada's approach, responding to American coercion by accelerating diversification into India, the EU, Japan, and other markets, is a template for how that can be done. It requires political will. It requires absorbing short-term economic costs. It requires explaining to domestic constituencies why the discomfort is necessary. But if done successfully, it creates genuine strategic autonomy. And strategic autonomy is increasingly valuable in a world where great powers are unreliable. The warm welcome Carney received in Mumbai wasn't just about bilateral relations recovering. It was about India recognizing that Canada has successfully asserted independence from American coercion and remained stable and functional throughout. That's exactly the kind of partner India wants. One that can be relied upon even when geopolitical pressures increase. This visit, therefore, represents more than just trade diplomacy. It represents the emergence of a different model of international relations, one where middle powers build resilience through diversification, where independence is demonstrated through calm defiance of coercion, and where partnerships are built on mutual respect for sovereignty rather than subordination to great power preferences. If Canada's approach succeeds, if the energy deals materialize, if the comprehensive economic partnership is signed, if the relationship with India becomes a genuine pillar of Canadian economic strategy, it will demonstrate that middle powers have more options than conventional wisdom suggests. And that demonstration will resonate far beyond Ottawa and New Delhi. If you want deep analysis on the geopolitical shifts shaping Canada's future, beyond headlines and beyond partisan noise, subscribe to Newsix Brief. Turn on notifications and stay ahead of every strategic move Ottawa makes on the global stage. And now I want to hear from you. Should Canada prioritize building stronger ties with India even if tensions remain, or should security concerns come first? Let me know in the comments. Share.